Lesson 1, Part 5, Tense Formulas. So far, we have learned 5 forms of our verbs: present active indicative, present middle passive indicative, imperfect active indicative, imperfect middle passive indicative, and future active indicative. Almost all verbs for verb forms in Greek are formed off of 4 endings: primary A, primary B, secondary A, or secondary B. Technically speaking, though, what we have been calling endings are actually the endings with an additional letter called a theme vowel. We've considered them to be all one because in a few forms it's hard to separate them. Sort of like what we just saw going on with our third declension nouns, where we had considered oo to be one ending, but it's actually an omicron with another omicron and the two of them blended together. Some of that has been going on here as well. Now, here are what the verbs would look like with them as separated out as we can get them. So blep-o, we can't really split out that O into the 2 pieces, but blep-e, splep-e, blep-a-men, blep-e-te, blep-a-un-si, blep-a-mai, blep-e, can't really split that one, blep-e-tai, blep-a-metha, blep-e-ste, blep-an-tai, blep-an, blep-es, blep-e, and nothing. There's the ending there is a nothing. Blep-a-men, blep-e-te, blep-a-n. So you can see here now these purple ones are ones that we can't really split out because something has really contracted and it's just not possible. But these are what we would have if we split everything out as we can. Now, do not worry at this point about splitting stuff up. That is not what I am concerned about here. What I want you to know is we're going to start learning what are called tense formulas, and we want to know all of the pieces that go into that formula. We introduced these just a little bit at the end of Greek 1 by saying present active indicative is the first stem plus primary A endings. But at this point, as we start to add a lot more verb tenses, I want you to go ahead and memorize these with all of the pieces, even though you don't necessarily understand what all of them are yet. And that's why I'm introducing this. So don't look at this list and think, oh no, I got to figure out what all these endings are doing. No, you can still think of the endings as o, ace, a, amen, ete, usi. That's fine. That will serve you very well for everything that we're doing for a while yet. But just have this in the back of your mind. You'll notice there's an extra omicron or epsilon that's at the quote unquote at the beginning of the ending. Omicron or epsilon, omicron or epsilon, omicron or epsilon. And even these ones that are in the purple, because they're sort of blended, you can see either an omicron or omega. Omega is a long form of omicron. You can see either an epsilon or an eta. The eta is a long form of epsilon. So that actually is what's going on. There's an omicron or epsilon everywhere in here. Just by way of random note, the omicrons show up before a mu or a nu. Epsilon shows up everywhere else, but you don't have to know that. So for now, all you need to concern yourself with is that everything we've learned so far has what is called an omicron or epsilon theme vowel. That's what it's called, a theme vowel. A theme vowel is a letter that goes between the stem and the ending. That's what it is. Now, we're considering it part of the ending for the moment, and that is perfectly fine, but just know that it's there. That's all that we care about, is knowing that it's there, because when we get to the aorist tense in a couple of lessons, it won't be there. So just knowing that this is here now will help us realize that it's not there when it's not. Now, most verbs in the indicative mood have an omicron or epsilon theme vowel. That's extremely normal. That's the way that you can actually tell that it's indicative normally, is that it has an omicron or epsilon theme vowel. We'll have different theme vowels in the other moods. So here are the official formulas of the tenses you have learned so far, and you need to memorize them. Present active indicative is first stem plus an omicron or epsilon theme vowel plus primary A endings. And the reason we really need to split out that omicron or epsilon theme vowel is this: when we get to the subjunctive, the present active subjunctive is going to be first stem plus omega eta theme vowel plus primary A endings. So the only difference will be the theme vowels, which again, right now we're considering them part of the endings, and that's fine, but we just need to know that they're here so we can properly memorize this formula so that when we get elsewhere, we'll be able to recognize what's going on. Present middle passive indicative is first stem plus omicron epsilon theme vowel plus primary B endings. Imperfect active indicative, we've seen all before the augment in the first stem, adding in this idea of the omicron epsilon theme vowel, and then secondary A endings. Imperfect middle passive indicative, augment, first stem, omicron epsilon theme vowel, secondary D endings. Future active indicative, second stem, omicron epsilon theme vowel, primary A endings. Only difference between PAI and FAI is the stem. Now notice, all of these have omicron epsilon theme vowels, so don't worry, it's gonna all be the same for now, easy enough to remember. Don't forget, A endings are used for actives, B endings are used for middles and passives. Primaries are used for tenses that are not secondary. Well, what are secondary tenses? Secondary tenses are past tenses that have, and in the indicative, they always have an augment. So past tenses, augments, secondary, those all go together. Primaries are for everything else. That'll help us remember these formulas. Yep, never have it. Omicron epsilon theme vowel, that's for the indicative.